All right, thank you so much for joining us tonight. I see we have around 45 people here with us today. We're going to wait maybe a couple more minutes for more people to join, but in the meantime, I wanted to thank you again for being here. And also just want to remind you again, if you're new to Zoom, just want to remind you real quick about the tools that Zoom has. So I'm going to please ask everybody to be respectful and have their mics turned off in the meantime. I will have like a Q&A session, so you'll be able to ask questions. You'll have around 2 minutes. Normally there is a raise option at the bottom of your screen. It could be where the reactions are. I guess this depends on what platform, what device you're using, but you'll be able to use this raise hand, and then this will queue up to the top, and we'll see your name and we'll call you and you can ask your questions. In the meantime, I guess I would like to invite you to use the chat to maybe introduce yourself, let your neighbors know that you're here. So you can just say your name and where you live if you want to do that. We always like to see people interacting in the chat as well. Just want to remind everybody that this meeting has a closed caption option available. So right now it's on, but if you want to turn it off, you can do that as well. And lastly, this meeting is being recorded. So if for some reason your neighbors couldn't come join us today, we'll be sharing this meeting with everybody along with the presentation. So yeah, thank you. Oh, I see we have people using the chat already. Hi, Alex. Hi, Barbara. And yeah, maybe let's wait 1 more minute for more people to join. We have around 42 people. And I guess we'll start soon. Again, just a quick reminder for the people that just joined that this meeting is being recorded, and we'll be sharing not only the recording of the meeting, but also the presentation with you. And again, I would like to ask people to remain muted in the meantime. You'll have time to ask questions, and at that point, we'll ask you to unmute yourself. So thank you for being respectful and remain muted for now. I see Mary Shaw in the chat. Hi, Mary. Thank you for joining us tonight. Again, if you just join us, please use the chat to say hi. Let your neighbors know that you're here. And I guess it's 6:05. I think we can get started. So I'm going to go ahead and pass the mic to Cassandra from DOMI.
Ricardo, I just got a message a minute ago from Cassandra that her computer had frozen. She texted me, so I'm not sure if she is back yet.
Oh, okay. I guess we can maybe wait a couple more minutes.
I can probably kick us off.
Okay, yeah, that sounds good.
Okay, and I take it that everybody can see me and hear me, so I'll just go ahead and start with an introduction. Thank you, everybody who has joined us tonight. I see that there are over 45 people that are participating, and that is great. The Department of Mobility and Infrastructure and the Move Forward program is really grateful for your participation in our process. So welcome to our Bartlett St third meeting, where we will be sharing with the community the designs that we have for the Bartlett St improvements that include pedestrian and bicycling improvements, crossing improvements, as well as some other project improvements, including the intersection with Serpentine Drive that has a couple of alternatives proposed, as well as some wayfinding where we'd like to receive some feedback. My name is Kim Lucas. I am the Assistant Director for Planning, Policy, and Permitting with the City of Pittsburgh's Department of Mobility and Infrastructure. Next slide, Ricardo. And before I get into the agenda, I would like to introduce my co-panelists. So tonight I am joined by Ricardo Solis, who is with Healthy Ride and is helping to run the presentation and is our community engagement coordinator. I also have Alex from Bike Pittsburgh, Paige, and I believe Nick Ross from the City of Pittsburgh's Department of Mobility and Infrastructure, the department's director, Karina Ricks, and when her computer comes back to life, Cassandra Leopold, who is the Move Forward program manager for the city's Department of Mobility and Infrastructure, will be joining us. But until then, I'll keep going. So as you can see on the agenda tonight, we just went through our welcome and introductions, and I will share with everybody in the group, which I am sure will not be the first time, but will be a reminder of what the city and our department's mobility goals are. And that's why we're here tonight. And then I'll kick it over to my colleagues to talk a little bit more about the Bartlett project and how we got where we are today with our specific design recommendations and a couple of proposals for how to improve the intersection of Bartlett Street with Serpentine. Next slide. And next slide. So again, I doubt that this is new for anybody who's on the call tonight, because this is the third meeting to talk about the east-west connection in Squirrel Hill. But the city of Pittsburgh has 5 primary goals. The number one of which, the city of Pittsburgh and specifically the Department of Mobility and Infrastructure has these 5 main goals. The first of which is about safety. Our goal is to make sure that nobody dies or is seriously injured using our roadways, regardless of what mode it is that they are choosing to use. Our second goal has to do with accessibility. We want to make sure that every resident and visitor, but namely residents in this goal, have access to fresh fruits and vegetables within 20 minutes travel time of their home, regardless of the mode of transportation that they're choosing. And we don't want them to have to own a car to be able to get to basic needs like fresh food. Our third goal has to do with short distance trips. We know that a large percentage of the trips in our city are very short, less than 1 or 2 miles, and that many of those trips are being traveled by automobile. When people choose to drive for very short distances, that contributes to congestion for every other roadway user. It contributes to poorer air quality because of emissions, and it also increases the challenges with finding parking and other accessibility issues. And that is why our department has prioritized making those short trips more joyful and accessible without a car, and especially by biking and by walking, so that for folks who have the choice, that they may choose to bike or walk for those very short trips. And for those who don't have the choice, that when biking and walking is their primary mode of transportation, that they are safe and connected and accessible routes available to them. Our fourth goal has to do with affordability. We want to make sure that in the city of Pittsburgh, where housing costs, like many other cities, continues to rise, that the combined costs of housing, transportation, and energy does not exceed 45% of any household's budget. And that's regardless of what that income level for that household is. We know we can't control the cost of energy or of housing, but we want to make sure that affordable modes of transportation are here to stay, including biking and walking and great access to public transportation. And finally, Pittsburgh is the home for all of us tonight. And we want to make sure that our streets reflect the pride of the residents of the city. Next slide. The Move Forward program, which is a partnership between Healthy Ride, which is the public bike sharing program, as well as with Bike Pittsburgh, and is led by the city of Pittsburgh. Our goal is to make better biking and walking connections citywide. And this all relates to the city's Complete Streets commitment. The city has had a Complete Streets policy in place for many years now, predating even the arrival of the Department of Mobility and Infrastructure. And the goal of our Complete Streets policy is to make sure that our streets are designed and built for all modes of transportation and people of all ages and abilities. What that means is that if we are trying to encourage people to get around without a car, that we're not relying on just the people who are fearless and completely brave. We want to make sure that our streets are safe and welcoming for people of all ages and all abilities for walking and biking in every mode that there is available to them. Next slide. And finally, I'm going to pass it on in just a moment, but Complete Streets also means complete networks. What you see here is a snippet of the community that we're talking about tonight, and specifically the connection, the east-west connection that we're trying to make improvements to. The green lines on this map are existing bike facilities, but as you can see, there's a very conspicuous gap that is within the community and between the two beautiful parks that we would like to improve accessibility to. Next slide. So as you can see here, we are trying to complete the connection between those two parks and to provide a better access for people who are already biking the east-west direction in Squirrel Hill, and for those who may be considering biking but don't feel safe enough to do it on today's streets the way they are designed and operating today. And with that, I'm going to pause and see if Cassandra's computer is functioning again.
It is. I am here.
Great. Well, I will go ahead and pass over to you then.
Happy to be a part of this meeting. Thank you, everyone, for joining tonight. Ricardo, would you mind going to the next slide? Awesome. So as you can see here in our development process chart, tonight we'll be going over the detailed designs of the east-west connector on Bartlett, and then we'll also be covering the preliminary designs of Serpentine Drive. Throughout this process, we have heard a lot from the public, and we will continue to engage with the community members, such as through this meeting, but you can expect that we will continue to reach out to you and the community for your input on projects, especially those here in the Move Forward campaign, because your input informs and guides the planning, design, and implementation of all of these projects. And this outreach is a continuation of a dialogue between the city and communities. As an example of this outreach, I actually wanted to personally thank the residents that emailed and reached out to me, our assistant director and director, regarding an error on our mailers. We were able to, catch that and reach out to the mayor's office and the Office of Community Affairs and our comms team. So the correction, what I wanted to bring at the beginning of this meeting is that the project does not impact parking on the northwest side near Schenley Park. I want to make sure that people had that option to hear that. But again, we are so thankful for the residents reaching out, hearing that, and having this level of outreach that we do have. And I wanted to assure everyone that we'll be going over the corridor in depth today to answer any questions that you may have. Next slide. Maybe the next slide. There we go. So just going over, for those of you who have been here with us the entire time, like Kim said, this is our third meeting, but I'll do a brief walkthrough of the timeline for our public meetings and outreach. So we had our Beacon Street meeting way back on April 1st with invitations and invites to community stakeholders. We had our walkthrough. So we had DOMI members present, TOOL representative presence, or our consults with us on the Move Forward campaign, where we met at Congregation Beth Shalom and walked the entire route of the proposed corridor. Then we had our first public meeting on April 8th, where we talked about a couple of options, which led to ultimately having a walkthrough of Bartlett on the 20th. So after that meeting and the walkthrough, we began to review Bartlett as an alternative. We had our second public meeting and heard from the community and stakeholders about Bartlett Strip being the preferred opportunity, or the preferred complete street connection. And so today, for the third meeting, we'll be walking through the Bartlett project and the alternatives for Serpentine Drive and have that conversation. And we will also be following this final public meeting up with a survey talking about Serpentine Drive and the wayfinding. And we'll be getting those responses back to you after we have reviewed everyone's responses on Engage, or through a SurveyMonkey, I believe. So considering all that, we are now at our third meeting, and I will now hand it over to our project engineer, Paige Anderson, to go over the designs for Bartlett.
Hi, everyone. My name is Paige Anderson. I'm a project engineer in the traffic division. And I'm just going to walk you through this design. It's very similar to the designs we proposed in some of the early meetings, but we've gone into some more detail. So we're here to share that with you all. The project extends, as Kim has spoken of earlier, the goal is to connect Frick Park and Schenley Park. So there's some existing bike lanes on Greenfield Ave and some existing bike lanes on Beechwood Boulevard that we are connecting, along with some connections to bike infrastructure on Wightman St. Along the project extents, which include Shaw Ave, Bartlett Street, and the very eastern portion of Beacon Street. There's a variety of safety improvements and bike infrastructure to make improved conditions throughout the corridor. Most of the corridor that is just a yellow line where you're not seeing any call outs will just be getting shared lane markings, improved crosswalks, and wayfinding and signage to make things more comfortable and clear directionally. But there is some of the infrastructure you will see along that I will go into more detail with is a climbing lane on the very eastern portion of Beacon Street from Beechwood Boulevard past Bartlett Street, that very steep slope. So what a bike climbing lane does is it gives space to cyclists on that big uphill where, you know, they need to slow down and gives some space for cyclists and cars to separate and move more comfortably together. I'll go a little more in detail about the contra-flow bike lane later, but that is along the one-way portion of Bartlett Street. We will have a contra-flow bike lane, which will allow bikes to travel bidirectionally along the street. This will not impact parking at all. There will also be various intersection safety improvements throughout the corridor, namely on the intersection of Serpentine Drive, Wightman Street, Murray Street, Shady Street, and Beacon Street. And a lot of those are in response to community feedback that we got from all of you. So thank you for reaching out to us about your concerns and informing our designs. So I'm going to go a little more into detail about those. If you go to the next slide. So first, I'll just go run through this again. I think a lot of you in former meetings have seen this, but this is just the existing conditions of Bartlett Street, some of the data that we have. So it's just over a mile, this corridor, this connection that we're trying to make with an average of a 30-foot width. So it's not a very, very wide street, especially considering that has parking on both sides. There's no existing bike infrastructure, and average daily traffic volumes range between 1,000 and 4,000. The posted speeds are 25 miles per hour, and there has been some crashes in the past years, including 3 that involved pedestrians. Next slide, please. So again, I'm going to start all the way on the east end of the corridor. I know I spoke about this a little bit, but this is the intersection with Beechwood Boulevard. A lot of the corridor that is very calm already. So we're just going to be adding some shared lane markings and wayfinding signage to help make it more clear and comfortable for those navigating the intersection. Beacon Street will be getting a climbing lane. This will require removing parking on one side of the street. Parking is not in super high demand here, and this is actually a recommendation from some of the public based on past meetings. So this will help make it more comfortable for cyclists climbing the street, but also motor vehicles that are trying to climb the street and maybe don't want to wait behind a slow moving cyclist that's trying to make their way from Beechwood Boulevard to Bartlett Street. There's an example on the left of an existing climbing lane that we have in Bloomfield. We're also going to be adding a crosswalk across Beacon at Bartlett in response to the community's feedback. So that'll have a new ADA ramp and a new crosswalk. Next slide, please. From the one-way portion of the street, and I actually apologize, I realize there's an error. It actually goes all the way to Murdoch Street. But from Shady to Murdoch, the one-way portion, we're going to squeeze in a contra-flow bike lane. So that means that there will be an existing travel lane in the same direction that'll be shared condition as it is today, but there is some space to put in a contra-flow bike lane. There's a really great example up on the left of a very similar contra-flow bike lane that we've been looking to in Washington, D.C. because there's parking on both sides, so the parking will be maintained. There's also going to be intersection safety improvements on Wightman, Murray, and Shady. So I'm going to go a little more into detail on those. Next slide, please. So Shady Ave, this photo on the left is the existing conditions for Shady Ave. The community has spoken to us about difficulty crossing this intersection. So the intervention that we found that is most appropriate is going to be a pedestrian refuge island. We have many of these throughout the city. There's some in the south side. There's a few in Bloomfield. This is an example in Lawrenceville. And so they calm traffic traveling along Shady and also provide refuge space for those traveling through Bartlett. This will restrict left turns of those traveling out of the Beth Shalom parking lot, which is a maneuver that we witnessed and we talked to the community about, and is quite dangerous. So it will create improved safety and traffic calming for all of those using the intersection. Next slide, please. So we also had some really great discussions with community members about Murray Ave. There is a small portion of Bartlett in the midst of the one-way on Bartlett. There is this very small portion between Murray and the Giant Eagle parking lot that is two-way traffic, but then becomes one-way again past the parking lot. An issue that was identified was wrong-way driving. So there is already a do not enter sign, but I know that it doesn't always get obeyed. So we are going to put this divider in that will help to further discourage dangerous wrong way driving and protect cyclists traveling within that contra-flow bike lane that will be added. There'll also be new high visibility crosswalks on the Murray intersection. Next slide, please. Another intersection that we want to improve safety and comfort for those traveling through is the Wightman Ave intersection. It can be difficult to cross, and we witnessed that, and we spoke to the community about that. So our proposed solution is to supplement the existing refuge island on Wightman that was installed in the past few years with some further delineation. So this is a constrained intersection that cars will traffic calm those traveling along Wightman in particular, and help ease comfort of those traveling through the intersection, and also protect the corners for the cyclists and the pedestrians traveling through. So this is a bit of a new typology in the city of Pittsburgh, but it's seen throughout other cities and is quite common, and there will be many more similar intersections in the city of Pittsburgh popping up that look like this. So it's a great way for us to calm traffic and create a more comfortable, safe space for all users traveling through the intersection. Next slide, please. Finally, I'm going to go into some more detail about an intersection design that is a little more preliminary. We've been fleshing out a few different concepts that we wanted to bring to the public and get some input on. So I think we mentioned earlier, there will be a survey at the end where you will be able to give your input on all of these projects. But the Serpentine Drive intersection with Bartlett is something that we've been looking at very closely and discussing with the community in depth. So we wanted to further get some input and go through some alternatives. So we're going to bring 3 different design concepts to the table here. None of these are final. They're all very early stages. So I don't want to get distracted in I want to talk about them all more conceptually, but we're excited to share them with you. So next slide, please. So first of all, Serpentine Drive, which has been closed for a few years now, is going to be reopened. It is going to be a smaller, a narrower right of way. So the new design will actually be a one-way traveling downhill, a shared condition. So any downhill cyclists will be sharing the lane with the motor vehicles. There will be an uphill contra-flow lane for cyclists traveling the other way, and there will be a pedestrian path, a designated pedestrian space on Serpentine Drive. So that is a design that's been working on. We also, in looking at the issues with the desire for traffic calming between Serpentine Drive and Murdoch in particular, we observed that there was very poor pedestrian accommodations, some missing sidewalks, very poor stop compliance. We did collect some data The speed issues were not outrageous. The median speed was the speed limit of 25 miles per hour but we did see 43% of motor vehicles speeding. So with that, we kind of identified the intersection of Serpentine Drive with Bartlett Street as a really, really optimal place for some interventions to make a safer shared condition. So I will go into those details now. Next slide, please. So I'm going to share with you three conceptual alternatives. The first is bump outs. You'll see that the bump out on the north, the top of the screen is a pedestrian path that will be protected with flex posts. And there's also a pedestrian path on the other side. They're both labeled. Bump outs create a constrained condition that slow vehicles and make a safer condition, in addition to creating space for designated specifically for pedestrians. Next slide, please. The second alternative concept is very similar. It's bump outs, but then we've added these pedestrian refuge islands. So these are similar to some of the refuge islands we've talked about with the other intersections. Again, this constrained intersection will slow traffic and improve safety for cyclists, pedestrians, and motor vehicles traveling through the intersection. But these refuge islands will further ease pedestrian crossings by allowing them a space in the middle if they desire to pause. Next slide, please. The final alternative that we are considering is bump outs with a traffic circle. So traffic circles are a tool that you see throughout the city. We've installed many smaller traffic circles in the past year. This one is a little bit bigger than some of those. It's a very large intersection, but the traffic circle will work alongside improved pedestrian paths, and sort of the splitter islands sort of act as a pedestrian refuge island. But then in addition, the circle can slow traffic, minimize conflict points, and improve the safety of all the users sharing that space by diverting traffic around it and slowing vehicles traveling through the intersection. This will also include the pedestrian paths that we talked about in some of the other designs. So this is the final of the three conceptual plans. They will all be included in the survey that is being linked to and you guys will see at the end. So I hope that you can offer your input. The other thing that we are soliciting feedback on is some of our wayfinding signs that we use that are going to be throughout the corridor. You can go to the next slide, Ricardo. So the wayfinding signs throughout the corridor are very similar to some of the ones you've seen popping up in other move forward projects throughout the city. I'm not going to go into detail on every single one of these sites, but I will tell you that they are all in the survey, so you can use that to look at them more in depth if you're interested. This is our initial feedback, our initial proposal. It points to public spaces throughout the corridor. Bartlett Street is a really great candidate for bike infrastructure because it is a parallel route with busier roads. But that sometimes means that people using the corridor who aren't as familiar with it, it can be a little bit disorienting. So we want to make sure that people can navigate comfortably. And a big part of that is making sure people understand where they're at. So we wanted to point to key public destinations along the corridor, including adjacent neighborhoods, business districts, parks, things like that. So if you have some input on this, we would really appreciate it because we know that you know your community better than anybody. So if you go to the next slide, there's a few more examples of some of the signage that you can expect, but these are all in early design phases and could be amended. Next slide, please. Finally, this does intersect with the Wightman existing bike lanes. So we wanted to make sure that we include that with wayfinding navigation. So we did include that in the survey as well, is our proposed wayfinding signage for Wightman Street between Forbes and Beacon. Next slide, please. So with that, that's kind of wraps up our design overview. Again, I'll say thank you for all the feedback we've gotten in previous meetings and the very active, involved community. With that, I'm going to hand it over to Ricardo to wrap us up.
All right, thank you so much, Paige. And yeah, I just wanted to remind everybody about the survey. Alex, if you haven't posted on the chat, you can do it as well. And just like a quick reminder that this meeting is being recorded, and if for some reason your neighbor or somebody missed this, you'll be able to share it with them. I'll send you the recording and the presentation via email, and I can also share the survey link as well. So I just want to remind everybody that if you want to be updated with Move Forward, updates about construction, surveys, coming up meetings, we have 2 links for you. So this link that you see on the screen, Alex just shared with you in the chat. And if for some reason you cannot access that right now, I'll send it to you via email. And if you would like to register for any updates regarding Move Forward, you can do it as well. And I'll send you that link as well when I send that email. But yeah, I think just wanna remind everybody that if you support this program, you can also get like signs. You can always learn more on Engage PGH as well about what the city and Move Forward is doing. And I think we can just move ahead to questions. I see some really good questions in the chat. And I also want to remind everybody that we have that raise option, which doesn't really mean that you raise your hand, but it's more like there's like a little button that you can click, and that will bring your name all the way to the top in the queue. And then we'll be able to call your name if you actually want to speak and ask questions. I see that Steve already has a raised hand, also Bram. So we can just go ahead and do maybe 2 from people asking questions using the raise hand, and then switch back to the chat, because I also saw that some people have really good questions on the chat. So if you guys are cool with that, I'm just gonna go back on the presentation just to leave this as a background in case anybody wants to see like the whole picture. And then we can go ahead and start with Steve. Steve, please unmute yourself.
Hi, everyone. I'm Steve Albert. I live at Beacon, the corner of Beacon and Darlington, and I appreciate all the work that goes into this. First comment's just a little bit of general feedback, because I've attended some of these sessions, and I think that it's a little bit challenging to judge from the diagrams and images that are presented what it's actually going to look like. And showing examples of what things look like in other cities isn't really very helpful, because Pittsburgh doesn't look like that. We have topography. Our streets, the houses are closer together, the driveways are on the street, they're not in alleys, things like that. So that's just a general comment. I think that some more realistic images, honestly, like what we saw with some of the options for Serpentine, would really be helpful. I don't quite, it all feels very piecemeal to me at this point, different solutions and different blocks. I think as a cyclist, even myself, that I'd find it a little bit confusing. Switching streets, switching types of lanes, it's just not consistent. Bringing cyclists up the hill on Beacon when we already have a bike lane on Beechwood also doesn't make a tremendous amount of sense to me. Beechwood's wider, it's a little longer if you have to go all the way around. But the truth of the matter is, if you're going to the nature center, you're going to stay on Beechwood anyway. I'm very opposed to the bike lane on the climbing lane on Beacon. I don't think that you have to also think of all of the seasons, and I don't know what kind of data you looked at as far as crashes and snowplow traffic and everything, but we have everything from school buses to medical vans and all kinds of things that try to make it up and down our hill when it's snowy and icy, and making the, putting the pylons up and things like that is going to make it ever more difficult in the winter, even for cyclists too. I just don't think that the lower part of Beacon is really the best place for bicyclists, period. I live here and I try to avoid it. I wonder also why, maybe someone can speak to this, why Shaw was used for the bike connection back to Beechwood rather than using Darlington to make that connection when we already have the sort of protected crossing at Darlington and Beechwood. I find that a very easy place to cross the street on foot, would be as well on a bike, could go right or left. Cars are already slowed down because of the speed humps. The problem with Shaw is that you have parking on both sides. It's two-way street with basically a one-lane cart path. The drawing doesn't show it, but it's a blind hill. You can't see what's coming up or what's coming at you. We have the same problem we had on Beacon with why the bike lane was moved to Bartlett in terms of the quantity and location of all the driveways and cross traffic, and coming out with parked cars and more bikes in the middle of the street, I think is just another problem. And I think that Darlington would be the better alternative there. So those are just some of my thoughts and suggestions. I appreciate all the work that everyone's doing. I think it takes, a lot of input and a lot of refinement to get to the best possible solution, but I'm not quite sure we're there yet. Thank you.
Thank you, Steve.
Yes, thank you, Steve. I just want to respond to just one thing, and that's just a clarification. The Beacon Street climbing lane, it will not include flex posts. So it's a buffered climbing lane. So those restrictions to, plowing and things will be diverted. I appreciate your input on Darlington in particular. I will certainly, we'll take all these into consideration.
Yeah, and I think I just wanted to tag on that I will share with our consultants having some low tier renderings and some before and afters versus some case studies. That goes a long way, where we want to be communicating as much as possible to what the residents see and be able to paint the clearest picture of the infrastructure. So I appreciate that feedback as well.
All right, so we're gonna go ahead. I'm gonna call Bran, and after that we can switch to some chat questions. So Bran, please unmute yourself.
Hi, thank you. I was also asking to get some clarity on what the level involvement on Shaw Avenue is, according to this proposal. And I appreciate the earlier question and concern. And by level of infrastructure, and I'm sorry I'm coming in late, under this, would I expect Shaw Avenue to have a protected bike lane, paint, bollards, or what would it look like on there?
Great question, Bram. I will clarify, any Shaw Ave, in addition to any of these yellow line that you don't see any call outs, will only have shared lane markings, wayfinding, and improved crossings, improved crosswalks. So it's especially when there's not something called out specifically, it's more of a calm street that we've already identified that we just want to navigate people through that connection. So you don't expect any bike lanes.
Okay. Thank you.
Sure, thank you.
Thanks for your question. So I'm gonna pass the mic to Alex real quick to see if we can maybe check some questions from the chat.
Yeah, so I have two main groups of questions. One is focused on Wightman and Bartlett. The other one's focused on the intersection of Beechwood and Beacon. But we'll start with Wightman and Bartlett, since that was brought up first. We have a couple comments, so I'm just going to read them. This intersection is of greatest concern for me as a pedestrian. We have other people who are saying, I agree, that's a difficult intersection. As a regular crosser there, I would appreciate a more guarded refuge island. Are the improvements for Wightman and Bartlett all paint, or will there be bollards or any other materials? Paint alone doesn't seem like enough. was another comment. Will the Wightman changes be paper and concrete? So we're just trying to figure out that specific. And then the last comment question was the Wightman intersection needs a traffic light. So
Okay.
all of that.
Thank you for all those comments and feedback. So the Wightman intersection, I'm sorry if that wasn't clear. It will include some flex posts. We will have some flex posts to guard the refuge islands in addition to those protected corners, because I agree with you, paint alone is not enough. I do know we would like to get this intersection in and see how it's working. But we would have goals that if it's going well to possibly in the future supplement them with more concrete infrastructure. But starting off with paint and bollards allows us some flexibility to see how it goes and get it installed that way. This iteration.
Okay. And then the Beechwood and Beacon comment. So they're looking to find out more information. Are there any changes to that stop sign intersection? The whole Dallas traffic doesn't stop. It's a terrible situation for pedestrians and cyclists. Beacon and Beechwood is one of my least favorite intersections in the city. Would personally set down the stretch of Dallas between Forbes and Beechwood. We need more information about this Beechwood Beacon intersection. And as a resident of the Beacon climbing lane, I think it was my approval for the bike access as referred to earlier, but the approval was both for a bike lane, but also a need for traffic calming on Beacon, as it was my understanding and the plan would include traffic calming, specifically that intersection at Beacon and Beechwood. Is that no longer part of the plan? Adding a climbing lane is safe as traffic is currently moving with disregard to pedestrians, and I can't imagine paint will change much. As a cyclist, I can say paint does change much in climbing lanes. I do feel safer, and having that designated space on the road, separation from cars, it is life-changing.
Yeah, that's good feedback. I will say we have improved crossings at the Beechwood at Beacon intersection in terms of just a high visibility crosswalks. And I know there was some as part of the bike lane over on Beechwood that was like missing a line. So trying to make some small improvements there. I do think the scope does not go as far as that Dallas intersection, which I know is confusing, but that doesn't mean just because it's not part of the scope of this project that it can't be considered for future projects.
Yeah, I wanted to add on that because this particular program, this project is part of the Move Forward campaign, there are limited funding that can go along with each of the projects. A majority of these would have flex posts, pavement markings, things that we would consider maybe potentially light tier, but agreeing with Paige that hopefully in upcoming years, we can do more, improvements in concrete, looking at signals, any kind of improvements. So we always think of this as the first step. So we hope that Bartlett can continue to be looked at and improved.
All right, sounds good. So we can move back to raise hands. So I'm gonna call Ellen. Please unmute yourself.
Thanks, Ricardo. My name's Ellen Kitzrow and I live at 5463 Bartlett Street. I'm really disappointed in the lack of intersection safety improvements and change to the Bartlett Murdoch intersection. The traffic isn't going to be coming from Serpentine, it's going to be coming from Wightman and from Murdoch. I was part of the walk that on Bartlett with Domi and others, and I remember how surprised folks were by the large number of cars that were just coming down at 4 p.m. I just don't see any of the changes that we had discussed. And I don't see any of these proposed changes making a difference to the amount of traffic that Bartlett receives. We had talked about significant changes that would make a real improvement to resident safety, and it doesn't feel like those were incorporated. I also have brought up multiple conversations that there needs to be left turn signals at the Bartlett Panther Hollow Boulevard intersection. The difficulty in turning left off of Beacon towards Greenfield is definitely one of the reasons that Bartlett is being used as a cut through. But basically it's the shortest route, and cars are going to continue to take it. And I also feel that there should be bike lanes in both directions on Serpentine. That's a very large road, and not having a protected bike lane in both directions just doesn't make sense to me.
For that.
Is there a reason that there weren't
So,
any
yeah,
changes to
Paige,
the Murdoch intersection?
Paige, I'll jump in on this one if it's okay.
Sure, thanks, Dave.
Sure. So operational changes that we discussed with the Murdoch intersection, and really that whole piece from Murdoch to the park. Unfortunately, we did get some pushback from other community members, and out of fairness to the group, the decision was made to not enact those changes. As for Serpentine, unfortunately, with the damage to the wall on the valley side of the street, we are narrowed down to a minimum of a 20-foot clear width between the new barriers that are protecting that drop off and the existing stone wall. And so to your point, we completely agree. And that section that Paige showed is really in that cross section. So the street drawing is really only in that pinch point. Once you get to the either end, the street will open up very wide, and there will be a lot of space that's dedicated to the bike and pedestrian side of things. It's really only through that pinch point that it's a problem, and we wanted to maintain some amount of minimum pedestrian dedicated access through that zone. And so going in the direction of the hill, riders will use the grade coming downhill, and then have their dedicated bike lane going uphill. And then pedestrians will have their own space beside that.
I'm sorry, that's incredibly vague about there were community members that disagreed with the Murdoch intersection, because all of the residents who participated in the walk were firmly in support of making changes and trying to reduce the traffic that's coming down, and the changes that are here aren't going to have that effect. So can you talk more about the community members that you decided to listen to?
We don't really share that kind of information in these meetings. It's certainly information that you're providing for us now that we'll take back and use as an equal comment as we make that final decision.
Hello? Hello, am I on? Hello?
Hi, let me see if we can go back to the person in the queue. How about we call Richard?
Okay, yes, thank you. Yeah, I'd like to, a couple of areas concerned. I'd like to start with Bartlett Street. Maybe you can display that drawing as I talk. A couple of concerns on that is, and they both relate to people, vehicles that want to park on the left-hand side of the street. They have to cross the double yellow line and basically go against traffic. They also have to occupy the bike lane and travel in the bike lane in order to position themselves to make the parking maneuver. So I'm concerned about the unorthodox nature of that, and then the safety implications of doing that. But in addition, I guess I thought that the design does not have a buffer between the lane and the parked cars in reference to doors of the parked cars opening and shutting. And it's your design. You have to figure out what the proper design is, but that seems a bit of a concern to me. And maybe it evolves from the fact that the street is so narrow to begin with. So that's my first of two concerns. And the other has to do with the best shot on their parking lot, that Shady Avenue. You would restrict left turns from that is restricted on their other driveway onto Beacon Street. It just seems like that's quite a implication on the synagogue. And I know you have safety in mind. That's what you're trying to promote. But still, I just don't know about the trade-off there and the impact that it has on Beth Shalom. That would be up to Beth Shalom to decide, make an official statement, I suppose. But that nevertheless is a concern to me that you're shutting off a large portion of their turning movements outside to exit rather the driveways.
Thank you, Richard. You were like cutting out for a little bit. I wonder, Paige and Cassandra, if you were able to listen to the whole.
I think so. I think the important parts at the beginning and the end.
Yeah.
I will say to begin, yeah, we understand that this contra-flow lane is a new, unique condition. The reason we had a photo from Washington, D.C. is that we were really scouring to find a very similar condition that actually uses those constrained. And we did, speak to consultants who've worked in cities who installed these before. There will be a 1 foot buffer between on the bike lane, but we know that is a very constrained condition. So the only reason that we could consider this is because it is such a low volume and slow moving road. But this is a design that could provide a lot of additional safety should everyone be using it appropriately. You'll absolutely, just as any bike lane adjacent to any parking facility, you can cross the bike lane as any other bike lane next to a parking facility to get to that parking. So it will be, we have taken those considerations. There are trade-offs, and I appreciate your concerns because it is certainly a constrained condition with not a lot of space to make decisions. I will say one addendum, just I don't know if this changed anything for you, but that it will be a dashed double yellow. The DC example, we decided that with PA state code that we felt were more comfortable using a dashed double yellow line. So that's the only change from that example photo between the DC example and this contra-flow example. Yeah. As for Bartlett at Shady and the Beth Shalom parking lot, we understand that this is a trade-off. The parking lot entrance is so close to that intersection. I don't know if they were installing that today, if we'd even be able to approve a parking lot that close to an intersection that people are crossing. So it is definitely a safety concern, and that was the reason for that decision, is that those left turns, especially with the slopes along Shady, the lack of visibility and the lack of visibility with the Bartlett intersection was raised to us as a big concern, that intersection, and there isn't a lot of space to work with. So that is where that decision came from, purely a safety standpoint. Yeah.
Thank you for that. I see we have 3 raised hands.
Yeah, so Paige, just one quick reaction.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Okay, yeah, just one quick reaction. Paige, you said that parking vehicles would cross the double yellow dash line. I'm not sure it's a cross. It's certainly not a perpendicular cross. It's an entry into that in the opposite direction to the way bikes are going. Crossing, it's an entry into the lane using it. Wrong direction, so to speak, but just a wording choice, I think.
Sure. Yeah, I understand what you're saying. I would say though, it works as most bike lanes adjacent to a parallel parking lane. I know that's oncoming traffic and that's a little different. Again, we would never consider this on a busier, higher volume, higher speed street, but it is the nature of the street that allows us to consider this a constrained example. And I'm sorry you cut out, so I hope I answered your question, Richard.
Thank
Thank you.
you.
Thank you for that. I think you're
Appreciate it, although I will react to the narrow street. I mean, it's a low number just independently. But anyway, I'm done.
Thank you for that. So I see we have more raised hands. We're gonna go ahead and call Mary Shaw. Please unmute yourself.
Hi, thank you for the thought that has gone into this plan. I have two questions that both actually pertain to the connection to Oakland. I realize that's outside the scope of this particular project, but I think this project should anticipate the connections into Oakland and make appropriate provisions. And I do hope there will be a connection to Oakland project at some point in the future. But the 2 points I have are these. One is that on Wightman, there is the directional signage, if I understood correctly, included a sign that directs bicyclists headed north on Wightman who are headed for Oakland to turn left on Forbes to go into Oakland. That puts them in a shared lane situation with heavy traffic. And I think most cyclists would regard it as safer to turn left instead a block earlier on Darlington. Take Darlington over and pick up Schenley Drive near the golf house. Even if Darlington is not yet a designated neighbor way, that would, for most cyclists, be safer and preferable. So that's a comment on the wayfinding signage that's actually part of this project. The other comment is about Serpentine. The downhill traffic on Serpentine is likely, and this is a point about the switchback corner that is uphill on Serpentine from where the wall is broken out. So it's in the wide part of Serpentine. It's above the Bartlett intersection that you've been talking about. But traffic coming downhill around that switchback is likely to cut that corner short and encroach on the bike lane. And so my question is, as you reopen Serpentine for two-way bicycle traffic and downhill automobile traffic, what is the plan at the switchback corner to make sure that the cars stay over on their side of the street rather than cutting through the uphill bike lane?
Thank you, Mary. As for the wayfinding and future connections comments, thank you for those. We'll certainly try to incorporate those into some of the wayfinding and future plans. And I will say for Serpentine Drive, especially around that corner, we are going to be fortifying it with flex posts because of that specific issue. Worrying about cars.
Sorry, I didn't hear fortifying with
flex posts. Flex posts. The
flex posts. Okay.
Yeah. Yep. So we will be including flex posts in that design, particularly at the corner and that turn for that specific reason.
Great. Yeah. Thank you. And note that I might not have caught all of the wayfinding signs that have this problem. I just noticed the one on Wightman headed toward Ford. So there might be others.
Sure. Thank you. That's good feedback. Thank you, Mary.
Right. Thank you so much for that. I see we have more questions and more raised hands. I know we're at 7 p.m. So I think I will recommend the people that have raised hands that you can maybe write your question in the chat and we'll be able to answer your questions and answer them via email. So I'm gonna hit and stop recording and just pass the mic real quick to Cassandra for the closing, I guess.
Yeah, I just wanted to thank everybody for coming out. It's no small thing that you're going to share an evening with us and look over these final designs for Bartlett and also then weigh in on Serpentine and the wayfinding. Please feel free outside even of the chat to email me at the city if there are further concerns that you have. But we are just thrilled that this group has been so communicative and we're able to continue in this design process. Please do fill out the survey. That really helps us to make those final decisions for what we have left in alternatives. And after that's done, you will have follow-up content on those survey results, and we'll be posting this presentation and everything else on the Move Forward website and also updating everything we have on Engage. So please continue to follow that. And thank you so much for giving us your time tonight.
Yeah, thank you so much. And again, the people that had raised hands, I'll leave the meeting on for a little bit so you have enough time to like write if you have like a long question, you can write that on the chat and we'll document that and create an FAQ and send that to you via email, along with the video of this meeting and the presentation. But yeah,
Great.
thank you so much for coming.
Thank you, everybody.
Have a great night.
Thank you so much for coordinating, Ricardo, and thank you, Alex. Much appreciated.